Morning's meeting to order. I'll first ask everybody to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. With that, let me note for the record that there's a copy of the Open Meetings Act here on the north wall of the legislative chambers. For health reasons, behind those partitioners on the other side of the far wall over by the windows, there is an automatic defibrillator for health reasons. And also, if you have a phone, I will ask you to turn that off or silence it. Before we start the meeting today, I'm going to ask us if we will have a moment of silence for the victims in El Paso and Dayton. And along with that, Commissioner Morgan has a point he wants to make with that, and we'll honor the moment of silence together with his request. You want to, PJ, no choice?
I wanted to mention, it's been within the last year, less than a year, that we had the All Makes Office Equipment 4 Generations 100-year anniversary, and Larry Cabbage, his daughter and son were here then, Jeff and Amy, and it was sad news my wife and I received last evening that he passed about 5 o'clock, who was just a tremendous individual and somebody that was a great friend to me for almost exactly 50 years, and I certainly learned a lot from him. He was probably the best salesperson and persistent individual I ever knew, and it's just heartbreaking, and I just wanted our prayers and thoughts to go out to the family, and especially his wife, who Andy, who is one of the most special people, to go out to them. And he also was put in the Business Hall of Fame in April, and I was lucky enough to pin the pin on him for that Hall of Fame that evening down at the Holland Center. And I know many of you sitting here right now know Larry and the tremendous individual and unique individual that he was. So that's all I wanted to say about Larry.
Okay. With that, again, we'll have a moment of silence for Mr. Cabbage and the victims of the recent weekend shootings. With that, I'll ask for a moment of silence. Thank you all. We'll go with that and call to order the Douglas County Board of Equalization meeting. Mr. Clerk.
Commissioner Borgeson is absent. Commissioner Boyle. Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Here.
Commissioner Duda.
Here.
Commissioner Kraft.
Here.
Commissioner Morgan.
Here.
Mr. Chair.
Here. Item A is approval of the minutes of the Board of Equalization meeting held Tuesday, July 30th, 2019. Item B, call for a meeting that set Tuesday, August 20th, 2019 as the date for certified hearing on, for the hearing on certified assessments and corrections. What's the will of the board?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Commissioner Boyle. Is there a second by Commissioner Duda? Please vote.
Reminder, Commissioner Boyle's vote won't appear due to technical difficulties, but he votes yes, as do the rest of commissioners. Motion passes.
With that, we'll go on to item C, which is citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for a citizen to comment on a Board of Equalization related matter that is not officially listed on the agenda. Are there any citizens' comments at this time? Seeing none, we're going to I'll ask for a resolution to approve items D, E, H, and I. What's the will of the board? Motion by Commissioner Boyle, seconded by Commissioner Duda. Please vote. No, I didn't do F.
May I stop the presses? Mike, I've always wanted to say that. Mike Goodwillie, Douglas County Assessor, Register of Deeds Office. Late yesterday afternoon, I received, and I think some other folks received, an email about item E. Dan, that was the one you wanted to?
Dan Esch, Douglas County Clerk.
Sure.
Yes, the reasoning being is some of these parcels on the C8, there's about 7 parcels in item E that also have property valuation protests. And after talking with Mr. Goodwillie yesterday, we thought it'd be better to take up the protests first, and then on August 20th, item E will come back. So that's why we wanted to remove item E.
Okay, so...
So we don't have two potentially contradictory board decisions on value chasing each other around.
That's fine. So with that, the motion should read, the motion should read D, H, and I with the removal of E. Are the motions is a second? It's fine with that? Yes.
I apologize, it was Commissioner Boyle motion and Commissioner Duda seconded? Okay, thank you.
With that, please vote.
Commissioner Kemp. Motion passes 6-0.
Do we need to do anything with E, like lay it over, or just leave it alone?
Teresa, York County Attorney's Office, I would lay it over to the 20th, and then we'll know that it's there, and it would be in that subsequent meeting.
Is there a motion to lay item E over to the 20th? Motion by Commissioner Kraft, second by Commissioner Duda.
One moment, please. All right, thank you.
Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Item F is review and approval of the assessor register of deeds valuation recommendations for those seeking valuations reductions for disasters pursuant to Nebraska statute 77-1301. Mr. Goodwillie.
If I may just give you the Cliff Notes version, Commissioner, there were 92 properties for which this relief was applied for. We inspected 64 of them. The ones that we didn't, the documentation, the backup from the taxpayer was thorough enough where it appeared that they were pretty much totally destroyed. Obviously those got a reduction. There are some of these that we did not recommend a reduction, and the reason is there is a 20% threshold for damage to qualify. Either 20% of the land, 20% of the improvement value, or 20% of the total. And there were several of these, I can't say the majority, but there were several of these that just didn't meet the threshold. For example, there was one where when our appraisers went out to inspect, it was like a $614,000 house, and the application was for relief, and it turns out after talking to the taxpayers that the owner said, well, we didn't have any water and all we lost were a couple of garage doors. Well, you know, they must be very fancy doors to represent more than 20% of a $614,000 improvement. So those are our recommendations. I think we did a pretty good job in a pretty short amount of time gathering and reviewing the data. And if there are folks that don't like our recommendation, they certainly have the right to protest the value if it's approved here today.
Okay. Is there a motion and a second from the board to approve item F? Motion by Commissioner Duda, second by Commissioner Boyle. Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Item G, set the 2019 real property valuations for real property protests that were reviewed by the Douglas County Board of Equalizations and its referees. So I see people out there. Let me lay the groundwork on how this is going to go to be consistent with the board's rules for debate. I'm going to ask the referees if they want to say something and lay the groundwork for the process. This is obviously not the last shot that some people will have. The process went on for the last couple of months or so. Once they lay out their process or rationale of the comments they want to make, they'll have 5 minutes to make that. If anybody from the public has anything that they want to say on particular items, you will get 5 minutes to say that, and then the board will have the opportunity to ask you back up for questions on your particular item if they want, and then we'll move with action. So with that, I will ask the referees and the coordinators if they want to come up and start, and then we'll go from there and ask for the public.
Good morning, Commissioners. Rick Coder, 5621 North 141st Circle, Certified General Appraiser. You folks have been kind enough to let me have this job as the referee coordinator for probably going on 15 years now. This year, we got through about 4,100 protests. Just take a second to acknowledge all the folks that you have hired over the years to do this. Our referees are all licensed appraisers. They're all top-notch. We have nobody who's been an appraiser for less than 20 years. There's only a couple of guys that have not been doing this for at least 10 years. They're good. people that become appraisers typically are not doing that because they thrive human interaction, shall we say. And these guys are all, these guys are all pretty dang good about talking to people. We have people coming in that are angry, upset, want information, and for a bunch of crusty old people, we do a pretty good job with it, I think, overall. Thank the clerk's office, Mr. Resch, and all the guys. They do a fantastic job for us again this year. As far as how we flowed this year, we're fighting human nature. We had about 4,100 protests, and we got, what did we get, over 1,000 on the last day or two, Dan, something like that. Everybody blows at the end, which really shortens our window up as far as time to do stuff. We're sitting around the first 2-3 weeks, pretty, not leisurely, but we got time to talk to people. People come in, you want to file the last day, we basically have 2 weeks to process. We don't have that much time for the warm and fuzzy and cuddly some people would like to have. There are 2 processes that we look at when we're doing our thing. The first one is evaluation of the property. That's pretty straightforward. Is your home, business, apartment, whatever you got, is it worth what the assessor has it valued at? Can you sell it for that? Would you take that for it? Pretty much a straightforward process. The second thing we looked at has kind of taken on a life of its own. It's a can of worms, whatever you want to call it. That's the process of equalization. Is your property assessed equally relative towards other properties, similar properties? People have, the theory on that is, hey, I got a 2-story house, I got an apartment, here's 3 more on my street, I'm not assessed equally as they are. Pretty straightforward. People have come in there and they walk in now with huge amount of information they create. Statistical nonsense, I call a lot of it. They just keep running theories and numbers and crunching and putting their Excels together until they come up with something that shows they're not equally assessed. There seems to be somewhat of a lack of understanding of the public as far as what equalization is. Equalization means, are you assessed the same as equal houses in your neighborhood? It does not mean, are you the average of every house in the city of Omaha? People have done that. People will take, 500 houses, average them all out, say, here's an average, I want that number. That is not what equalization is. It is a real misconception as far as the public of what exactly we're looking at in the process. We do the best we can talking to people. A lot of them we found out did come in and talk to the assessor staff in February or January and had that preliminary hearing also. There's quite a few did that and then came down later and saw us. That's what we did, short and sweet. Questions now, or do you want me to sit down, Chris? You tell me
Later.
what to do.
They can call you back up later. So,
Okay.
Okay. If there's anybody from the public that wants to make comment on items on item G, you have your opportunity now. If there's anybody that wants to make comment on any items on item G.
Larry Storer, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, Nebraska, 68132. I'd like to comment on the presenter's comments. Some of the comments that he made that people come in with all this information that's maybe not relevant and they don't understand the process. Well, there's not very much information available from the assessor's office, so to speak, unless you go on the website. You try to put all this information together yourself in some meaningful form. The only simple form for the average citizen is what's happening on my street or within my block, 1 or 2 blocks area. And I can tell you that it's not equal. In my area, there are various sizes of houses, different on any one street. And some of the values for smaller houses are bigger than bigger houses, and some of the bigger houses are smaller valuations. I have a friend in another neighborhood of West Omaha, around 120th, that has sold her property. Her valuation went up way up. She couldn't afford it. She protested, was not successful. But apparently because of her protest, one of her neighbor's houses, which was larger, on the same street, not very far away, with a much lower valuation. found out that this person had complained, and because she complained, her valuation then went up. So she's no longer got friends in the neighborhood. She sold that unit to buy another one in a less valued area. To me, that's not equalization, folks. So what you hear sometimes at the microphone from the official side is not necessarily an accurate viewpoint of the property tax situation from a citizen standpoint. Thank you.
Anyone else? Let me be clear, if you've got an item you're not happy with, you need to make your comments now.
Hello, folks. Sean Mullen here on behalf of the Orpheum Tower.
Note the time, Sean.
Pardon me?
No, just note in front of you the time. He'll let you know.
Gotcha.
It's on you.
The Orpheum Tower is a 100-year-old converted apartment building downtown Omaha on 16th Street. The owner's out of Lincoln. He's the property struggled with a lot of maintenance issues and the rental rate that is a result of the deferred maintenance, and the fact that he's competing with downtown apartments that that have the benefit of TIF and he doesn't. So we spent a couple of years talking to the assessor's office on the valuation, never got any relief. The assessor's office suggestion to us was go get an appraisal, so we got an appraisal, and we submitted it to the Board of Equalization. We had an appraisal of $11,840,000. The property is valued at an amount in excess of $15 million, and the board decided not to give us any relief. And the taxpayer's position is that he did everything that he could do. He went and got the outside appraisal. He did what the assessor's office suggested that he do to back up his argument that he was overvalued, and he's got no relief.
Okay, thank you. To the board, once everybody that has a complaint makes their point, I'll allow the board members to call you back up to ask you their question.
Thank you.
Anybody else has a remark on an item on item G? Again, if you have a complaint to a particular item on G, this is your time to make your comment. Going once. No, I'll give you a chance. Okay, I got you. Okay. Right now, we have Commissioner Morgan and Commissioner Moore. Did you want to comment? Okay. Well, Commissioner Morgan, then you. Commissioner Morgan.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank our referees, Catherine Hall, who helps coordinate everything, and Rick, for your work that you do as referees, your patience, your perseverance about looking at everything carefully and trying to, for sure, make the right decisions, which is not always easy. And believe me, and I've said it publicly many times, the assessor definitely has the most challenging job, working to try to do the best job they can, her team down there. So I want to clarify that. I think now's the time I could ask Mr. Mullen a question that was just at the microphone about the Orpheum Tower.
Mr. Chair, if I could jump in, if any of you were following along on your list, it's on page 109. If you wanted to see the total recommended value, that's before you right now. It's about 5 rows down. It should be at the bottom of the page. Should say 109 out of 151, and it's in alphabetical order by owner name. And it's on page 109, about 5 rows down.
So, Mr. Mullen, my question, so you had someone do an appraisal of this property. Were you asked to do that, or was that requested by the assessor's office?
It was suggested by the assessor's office that we do that in order to confirm what we felt our value was. Yes.
And did they use an income approach at all in that appraisal? I assume they did.
The appraiser
That-
used an income approach, yes, and a sales approach. Reconciled the two, and
So let me ask you a question. You have a net operating income on that property,
Yes.
and my question may not be easy one. What kind of a cap rate with the income approach did that building end up with? Do you know offhand?
What kind of a cap rate was used by the appraiser?
Right. If, if I have a net operating income after all expenses, because on that, you're paying some of the expenses, the operator of that building is, his net operating income, what would be the cap rate of that property at the 11 million that he appraised it for, do you recall?
The appraiser used 7% cap rate.
And it's 7, it was 11 million.
Yes.
So it would be well over 10% return if you were using that 15 million. So I think that cap rate's more than fair what he used, the 7, because it's not a triple net. Usually it's triple net buildings that'll be at the 7.5.
Correct. The owner
As
has-
low as 6.5.
So the owner has the burden of paying for all the expenses. That's correct.
And was that made available to the referees also, that appraiser,
Yes,
appraisal?
the appraisal was, and in the past, we always provided all of our financials.
And I'm not sure if one of the referees wants to comment on that, or that may be inappropriate, but, and when you showed that appraisal, was there a reason that they felt, well, we told you to get the appraisal, but we don't like the appraisal, or some reason?
No, when we presented the appraisal to the Board of Equalization, they just accepted it with no comment. I haven't seen any of the referees' comments back yet, that, I think just from a timing standpoint, so I don't know why it was rejected.
And was that appraisal, and I was a licensed appraiser for more than 10 years, several licenses. I gave it up. I guess that was wisdom on my part, which I don't have a lot of, but some years ago. Was it an MAI?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I don't know if Mr. Goodwillie is waiting to comment, but may have something further, and I'll let Commissioner Boyle go ahead.
You comment on this?
I would.
Please.
Mike Goodwillie, Douglas County Assessor, Register of Deeds. I'm not interested in a really long, protracted argument, but when the referees make a recommendation, they usually have comments, and those comments are usually available someplace, and if they aren't, I imagine that the commercial appraiser supervisor might have some thoughts about why that appraisal was rejected. I would point out about this property, it actually did sell in December of 2016 for $15 million, okay? And just one more note on appraisals. Last year, there was a mansion on Dodge Street where Mr. Mullen represented the client, and he had an appraisal. And at that time, Commissioner Morgan asked him the same question. Was it done by an MAI, a member of the Appraisal Institute? Mr. Mullen's answer was it was. That was not correct. And in fact, that appraiser had had his license suspended for a period of 6 months just before he did the appraisal. So I think what's really pertinent here is why the referees decided that appraisal wasn't good enough evidence to reduce the value. And I think you'd have to ask them. But what I would say is if the property sold for $15 million in late 2016, man, something really bad would have had to happen inside in the intervening years to get it down to 11.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle?
Well, I appreciate your opinion, but I'm not sure. People make mistakes when they buy property and maybe overpay, and I don't know that it's really, I can connect those dots, but I appreciate your opinion. I'd like to ask Mr. Musto to come down to the podium and talk a little bit about this appraisal and if it was rejected, why it was, if you can. And would you give your name and so forth?
Chris Musto, 1011 South 78th Street, Omaha. This was not one that was brought up a little bit earlier for me to have significant
Would
information.
you explain who you are for the people?
Your commercial coordinator for the referees. I kind of oversee what the referees do, and after they've done it, kind of take a look at it.
Good, thank you.
And as I had referenced before, I don't have any material. I didn't
Right.
set up for this prior to coming here. I will say I remember the property. I do remember it was protest.
Dan Esch, Douglas County Clerk. We have what he said.
Okay. Well, okay, what I said, what the referee said, and then I'm looking over what the referee has said, and unless I find some significant question in there, I'm probably not going to change their number. It does happen once in a while, but again, there's a voluminous amount of documentation that's submitted, including the appraisal, and I did not read each and every page of that appraisal. I can tell you that, because we wouldn't be here today with everything done if we had to do that on everything that gets submitted. I'm pulling this up as I hear. Okay, these are the referee comments, and I did go back and look into the appraisal to see if I could follow what was being referenced here. But the comments are, the tax representative has provided an appraisal from 5/29/19. Actual income and expense information were provided for the subject property. The subject property has commercial bays and apartments, and I'm assuming he took this out of the report itself. And I've got some familiarity with the property, and yes, it does have apartments, it does have some commercial. In reviewing the information presented, the tax representative, I found that the income approach, no income for the commercial bays was included. However, 2 commercial bays show on the income of $4,683.08 per month. Given the error, I find the appraisal not credible. In conclusion, I feel it's insufficient evidence was presented to support a change in value. And I think what the referee is saying is yeah, we see the appraisal was written, and they might have missed, $4,000 a month turns into $50,000 a year, capitalizing at whatever the capitalization rate is. It's a pretty significant number. And at that point in time, we were really stepping away from it, in addition to seeing information such as the previous sale a few years ago, not saying that that's what we were relying on, but just the summation of the data that we had available, we selected to, at this point, dismiss it, fully understanding that the property owner has an opportunity to file with the Tax Equalization and Review Commission and maybe get some clarification and go forward with that.
I'm curious, do you know, or can you tell us, and maybe Mr. Mullen can, that the person who completed the appraisal is credible and licensed, and do you know who the person is? Can you see there who it is?
I can, if I can pull up the data, and I don't know that you can do that. I think I remember who it was, but I don't want to bring somebody's name out into this without knowing exactly who it was.
I'm not really asking you to do that. I just really, since it was brought up, I think it's really important that we clarify it.
If it wasn't indicated here by the referee that it was not a licensed appraiser, because that would, they're different, I would take the premise that it was probably a licensed appraiser.
All right. Well, it seems to me that, being a layman, I don't have the skills that Mr. Morgan does, and I am amazed by the numbers he pulls out of the air, and they're always correct. It seems to me that even though the property was sold in 2016 for $15 million, that there could be a lot of factors in that. Maybe there's an attachment to the building, maybe it's something's going really well, maybe there's a big crowd in front of the Orpheum. Who knows what influenced the buyer to pay that price, if indeed it wasn't really worth $15 million. But the fact is that it seems to me that when the assessor's office says, go get an appraisal, and then they get one, that it seems like, first of all, that they were asked to do it, and secondly, an appraisal made now, and this last May, whenever it was, whatever the date was, that it is more current and more accurate than a sale price. I mean, people can frequently overpay or underpay for buildings, that it seems to me the appraisal should be what's, if it's by someone who knows what they're doing, should be what governs. I mean, is that wrong? I mean, what does the appraisal mean to you? Is it?
You're not wrong, but I think the referee noted something of question which made them wonder whether or not the appraisal, again, the appraisal is a documentation that could have I don't want to say error, but possibly an error, a misrepresentation unintentionally, that, an omission that took place that made it a little more confusing to be able to take a look at that. Going back to, and I don't want to take this away from anybody, but there's a lot to look at, and to be able to get through all of this in the time frame, we probably don't have the generous time frame that we would enjoy to review an appraisal for every cross T dotted I. And could we have missed something? Absolutely. I put it upon ourselves to try to not, but it's difficult. It's difficult.
Well, I appreciate that, and I understand. I mean, the time crunch is something that we deal with here too, because we get this on, Wednesday night or Thursday or something, and then we're supposed to figure all of this out in that short period of time, and it doesn't work real well. For me, anyway, it's very difficult to get through all of these numbers and figure out what's really happening. So,
I understand that.
in any event, I appreciate your comments, and I just appreciate your experience, and I'll be calling you back up on some other buildings, I'm sure.
Thank you. I look
Thanks a
forward to
lot,
it.
Chris.
Commissioner Moore.
Ask you one, and maybe it's Sean that may answer this one, and I don't know. How many square feet are there? I know it doesn't show on that page, but do you recall that, or does Sean have the square footage of that building? Just curious. The Orpheum Tower.
I just don't have that off the top
I
of my
wouldn't
head.
think you would, but I wanted to ask, and I'll ask if Sean might have that, just to share that with us.
I do have it. Give me 1 second here. $147,089 gross square feet.
Okay.
And Commissioner Morgan, if I could just respond to Mr. Musto's comment. On page 46 of the appraisal, there's a paragraph that says that addresses this commercial space issue. It says there's one commercial bay in the first level consisting of 2,560 square feet. This has been used as a coffee shop but is currently vacant. And then he goes on to talk about the finish. So my only point is that the commercial space was addressed in the appraisal and commented that what the use was, what the square footage was, and what its current status is, that being vacant.
So if I use the correct numbers, you're saying about 147,000 square feet,
Yes,
and they have it valued at 15 million.
Yes.
Is what it's assessed for. So it's $100 a foot.
yes.
Okay, and just for the board's information, you have, I saw some of these recently that were sent to us in the last 10 days, 2 weeks. You have the First National Bank Tower, the new one, valued at $130 a foot is what I recall. And you have some other buildings in the downtown area valued, and I don't know that you did comps, but some of those in the $80 range, I know. Now, I don't know the occupancy of all of those properties, like the old First National Tower over on Dodge where the Red Lion used to be in the hotel. I know that one's around $80-some a foot. That was information that was sent to all the commissioners in the last 10 days. So seeing this at 100, you know, I don't know if you looked at some of the other buildings in downtown. Now, those aren't apartments, those are office buildings, but at the same time, they're much newer buildings than your building.
Well, I think that's right, and Commissioner, I think the other thing that I'd like to point out is that all square footage is not created equal. And in the apartment, so if we're talking about the First National, the old First National, the new First National, you know, some of the newer properties downtown, first of all, from an operating standpoint, they have the benefit of TIF. And second of all, these older units, this building's 100 years old, and these older units are bigger. So a one-bedroom generates X amount of money, X amount of rent, without regards to its square footage. So your per square foot on a bigger unit is going to be smaller than the rental income on a smaller unit. And in the apartment business, it's all about net operating income. And just to give you a little perspective, the net operating income that we provided to the county was, and this was actual for 18, a little over $400,000 of NOI. The appraiser used 800, and the county used $1 million.
I depend a lot on, you know, my colleagues, and I certainly depend a lot on Teresa Urick, the attorney, and I want to be clear about something, and I want you to state it accurately, too. For the record, I had the Crossroads listed in about 1981, and Sean Mullen happened to be employed by Touche Ross, an accounting firm here in Omaha, because you're a CPA, and I assume you're still a CPA.
Yeah, an attorney, yeah.
And you worked, I hired you and Dave Steyer to work on numbers for me in 1981 when I listed that property to make sure I could get it right, because I wanted to make sure I was doing the best I could to sell that property, which we did, and had a contract with yourself. That's the last time I think I've done any business with you or had any work, and I don't know who owns this and haven't been in the building since, I can't even tell you when Holland Reeves and Riley was in it many years ago. Old Bob Riley and Dick Holland had their advertising. And Teresa, I want you to be sure that if that presents a conflict, then I shouldn't make a statement about a thought I have.
Teresa, your county attorney's office. Commissioner, that it's my understanding, based on what you just said, that you have no current business relationship with Mr. Mullen. Is that accurate?
Right.
And this happened a number of years ago. I don't think you have a present conflict. I think you can say whatever you deem to be appropriate today.
And I'm pretty sure I haven't, and that's almost 40 years ago, not
I think
quite.
those were good times, but
The only
that's a fair
thing,
statement.
and I think politics, as Terry Carpenter told me when I was lucky enough to be in the legislature, politics is the art of compromise. And maybe there's a way that there may be a consideration for a compromise. I don't know if we should do it today or look at some things if it has to be done today. But it seems like, you know, with that appraisal, with the value, I know, Commissioner Boyle, you like to do things like that.
Yes.
That's the only thought I have, and I think some of the other commissioners can comment about it. I respect what the assessor does and the referees, so I'm not trying to go around him, but I'm just trying to look at this in a very fair way.
Before we go to Commissioner Boyle, you said all square footage is not created equal. I'm just curious, when is a square foot not a square foot?
Mathematically, it can be equal, but from a valuation standpoint, they're not equal. And an instance where they wouldn't be equal is a square foot in the new First National Tower is going to get a different valuation. It's still a square foot, as a square foot in the Orpheum Tower, which is a 100-year-old building with some deferred maintenance. So mathematically, the square foot is a square foot. Valuation-wise, Commissioner Morgan's comment earlier was, well, we're comparing square footage to other properties downtown, and I just want to make a point that I know he already knows, and that's that square foot at one place does not have the same value as it does somewhere else. So if it's 120 at a brand new building and it's 100 here, that doesn't have the net operating income to support the $100 square foot value, the income that the property generates is going to
trump the square foot valuation.
Okay, so, Rich or, Chris, can one of you all, because my knowledge of this not being a realtor kind of comes as I hear situations. This is the first time I've heard this situation, so can somebody explain to me what's the difference in a square foot?
Commissioner, if I just reduce this to something we all understand, it's
Okay.
put like your house. When they assess your house or appraise your house, the main floor, second floor, whatever you got, are at so much per foot. The basement, still square foot, that is assessed typically at a lower value. Its contributory value is less in the basement than it is above grade. Same as an apartment may have different valuation than a commercial building or an office space. It's the use of the space you're referring to, not just the size of it.
But his argument is made on age, not use. That's how I'm hearing his comment. He's comparing a newer building to an older building, not a basement to an upper level. Am I fair? Because he just made an age argument. He didn't make that argument.
I don't think, I stepped on Chris's toes, or I shouldn't have done that. I got in trouble up there, so I should have known better than that.
Again, Chris Musto, I don't mean to step up, and I don't want to get into a situation where we're debating. But we talk about a new building and we talk about a 100-year-old building. People are talking about actual ages, chronological ages of building. We don't usually talk about chronological other than a reporting factor of what we're utilizing. We talk about effective age. You may take a brand-new building and you may say it's been built well, and it is effectively new. It's brand new. You may take a 100-year-old building and take it down to the studs and replace all the electrical and all the plumbing and the roofs and change the functionality of the inside. And a 100-year-old building can become effectively a 20-year-old building or a 10-year-old building. I mean, and I don't want to bring that into this, but this is an old building. It has gone through different levels of work. So I wouldn't say it is effectively 100 years old. I'm not going to tell you what effectively it is. I would need to look at additional information and study that to be able to understand that a little bit better and report that to you. But I think that's when we're talking about two different prices on a price per square foot, we've got to look at effectively what that building age really is. And that would make a difference. If you had a 100-year-old building that had never had updating plumbing or electrical, it's going to be worth less than a building that has just gone under substantial renovation, and they could be equal in size. Is that fair? Is
No, that's
that
fair, but
reasonable?
I just want to make sure, I've never heard that argument in my 15 years up here, so I just want to make sure I'm not setting a new precedent. And I respect all of their arguments for the dollar amount for the businesses, but, at least personally, I'm leery and it's setting a new precedent that could open up a whole other deal.
I'm not trying to step on toes. I'm just trying to say that there's a way to look at this that might bring it a little bit closer. And I'm not saying that everybody's always going to be in agreement, but actual age and effective age, we're really much more concerned about effective age.
Okay.
Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle, then Commissioner Kraft.
I would defer to Commissioner Kraft.
Commissioner Kraft.
Yeah. It seems to me that it was many years ago that this was converted into apartments. Do we know how many years ago that was?
I think I can answer you. I was mayor, and it was the first building we did downtown.
I was going to say 1987,
It was actually earlier than that, I think.
84 maybe.
Yeah, because essentially they were my neighbor, and that sounds about right. And so those apartments are now
30 years old.
30 years old plus, okay? Knowing the little bit I know about retail and apartments, because for a while I did own some space downtown, I do think for this particular building, having been in it, and the elevators that are in it, and the condition of the apartment I was in, when I was buying used furniture way back when. Prior to 2008, I would say this building should be evaluated at about $13,500,000. And I would make that motion.
Oh, we're not there yet. but-
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
You got any more questions for anybody? Commissioner Brown?
No.
more questions. Okay. You want to come back? No. Okay, anybody else wants to speak on these items? Mr. Goodwill.
I'm going to leave you with two thoughts. One is an appraisal that does an income approach that leaves income out is not a very credible appraisal. And second, the appraiser that did this appraiser was the one Mr. Mullen used last year, and the reason his license was suspended was because his appraisal work did not comply with either the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice or the Nebraska Real Estate Appraiser Act. And I guess one more thing. It was an arm's length sale for $15 million not all that long ago. So it's your process, commissioners. You can listen to your referees that you pay good money to review these things or not as you wish. But I think those facts ought to be in front of you.
Commissioner Boyle.
Well, I did ask about the license of the appraiser and got a positive response from the gentleman in charge of the commercial appraisals. And the other thing is that there was a coffee shop apparently that was vacant, so that didn't produce any income, and so that drove that figure down. And I don't know that suggesting that the appraiser is still in the status that he was a year ago is productive. I don't know that, and all I can do is take the response that I got from the gentleman who's in charge of the commercial appraisal. So I think this one, like I said before, if you can pay a price for something and then a big price, and it turns out, we all hear stories of that. Whether it's a business, just recently I was watching a story on the president's son-in-law and his family paid $1.4 billion for that famous building, 666 Park Avenue. And they were trying to get it refinanced, and they finally did through Qatar and Saudi Arabia and everything, and it was interesting. And they stepped up and put the money up, but they couldn't sell it. They couldn't do anything to it. They wanted to tear it down and do all this. So, people make mistakes when they buy buildings. They are in love with them, whatever it is. The Orpheum Tower has a great name. So who knows why? We can't go back to 2014 or 15 and find out what motivated them. But the fact is that I don't think, I was in that building, probably a month and a half ago. And even up on the top floor, the biggest apartment up there. And it is not really that hot. So I really do agree with Commissioner Kraft that it's more like $13,500,000.
Commissioner Duda.
I take the tack, we do urge particularly large properties to go out and get an appraisal. And generally, our referees accept those appraisals. I believe if they don't accept an appraisal, the warning flag should go up about that appraisal, and they do with me. I'm not comfortable. I don't believe this property has dropped in value in the last 3 years. This is a hot part of town. Old apartments are in demand. I don't think this property has dropped 25% in value in the last 3 years.
Okay. Seeing that there's no further comment here, none out there, we'll go to action with Commissioner Kraft. If you want to make your point now, that's
We'll make a motion that we reduce this property.
Well, first, let me ask, is there a motion to approve item G?
Item what?
There's a motion to approve item G. Is there a second?
No, I don't make that. Can we still have a conversation?
No, we will. I'll bring
fine.
Commissioner Kraft as an
Okay.
amendment. Is there a motion?
I'll make that motion.
There's a motion.
I'll second it.
Commissioner Duda made the motion to approve G.
Go ahead.
Commissioner Boyle seconded. Mr. Clerk, you want to make your point now so it's corrected on the record for G?
Sure.
Dan Esch, Douglas County Clerk, just a small amendment to make. So on page 17, the address is 5819 Maple Street. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the owner's name correctly, but Baton Properties - Maple Street. Just a small $100 total change in value. The spreadsheet says $238,100. It should say just $238,000 even. So the improvement value is going to go down by $100, thus the total value will go down by $100. So that just has to.
Terrible mistake for you.
Yeah, well,
Thanks.
I know, it's small, but we got to make sure it's right, so.
You're right, thank you.
Yep.
There's a motion, a second. Clerk, Commissioner Kraft, do you want to make your proposed amendment?
Yes, I would amend this to change the item Omaha Orpheum Tower, excuse me, to $13,500,000.
There's a motion, is there a second for that amendment?
Okay, let me ask a question.
Oh, I need a second for the amendment first.
All right, I'll make the second.
Okay, there's a second to Commissioner Kraft's amendment, Commissioner Morgan.
And then what we'd be voting only on that amendment at this
Yes.
time.
Yes.
Then what we would be voting on later would be
The complete.
all of the package.
Right.
And I had planned to abstain from that because we manage over 400 homes for people, plus I've done business with some of the people in the commercial area, so I had told Dan Ish yesterday, he and I discussed it. I didn't ask Teresa this time, I gave her a break. But I told Dan what I was thinking of doing, abstaining because of the list that would be on that. But I think it would be okay for me to vote, to second your motion as I just did. But I do plan to abstain from voting on this. And I think that reduction you're making is about 10%
Yes.
of the value, and it's about 2.5 million more than what they had requested.
Yes,
And 2.5 million more than the appraisal amount.
correct.
Okay, so I did second that.
Okay.
So would we be voting just on the
Oh,
amendment
just on the
first?
amendment right now.
Okay.
There's a motion and a second on the amendment. Please vote on the amendment.
One moment, please.
I vote yes.
Okay, we are ready. Motion fails. Commissioners Boyle, Kraft, and Morgan voting yes. All other commissioners voting no, so 3-3.
With that, the original motion is on the floor. There's a motion and a second for the original motion.
Mr. Chair, with just a clarification with my friendly amendment?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Boyle?
I believe there are other people in the audience that want to speak about items, so we're not, I don't want to approve all of these valuations unless others are heard. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, and I asked that clearly at the start, if you got any adjustments or any description that you needed to speak. I'll give you a last point to speak on this if you have anything else.
Is there, could I ask specifically, is there someone here representing the QTAC building?
Please ask.
Did you wish to speak?
Howard Hahn, 1650 Farnham, Omaha. Yeah, I would be happy to answer any questions, Commissioner Boyle, that anyone may have, but I don't have an affirmative statement to make.
Okay, that's just fine then. I wanted to make sure I understood. Thank you very much, Mr. Hahn. Thank you.
With that, there's a motion and a second to approve item G on the floor. Clerk, Mr. Clerk, are you ready?
I would like to make one comment.
Please do.
You know, we heard, at least I heard, the gentlemen who are in charge of Mr. Musto and Mr. Coder, one of them made a comment about the time that is needed to go through all of these, and it's pretty much it's a rushed operation for everybody, and it really, it's an awful rush for us, and you know, we get these 4,000 changes and valuations, you know, 72 hours before we have to vote, and it's not possible. They're on a spreadsheet, and I have to take my shoes off to count when I start working with this, and it exceeds the space on my laptop, and so I have to scroll across, and then I lose places where, I mean, it is really a lousy deal for me personally. It's good work. You know, Mr. Ash is so accurate. You just saw what he did. It is a wonderful presentation, but it is too much for us to realistically do our job. I'll speak for myself, and the other commissioners can do so if they want to, but I don't feel familiar enough with all this volume of material in front of us to be able to really say that I understand what's going on and that I'm using my knowledge to vote on this. This is simply throwing darts. I have no clue about what's fair and what isn't. And the reason I asked about the QTech building was that I understood there were some changes that maybe should take place because I've been communicating. And another lawyer contacted me about an issue, but he's not here today. Now, I'm concerned that, his property that he represents maybe have been resolved too, I don't know. I guess what I'm saying is this is like a big fire hose and you've got your mouth open and it happens about 72 hours before we have to vote. And I'm almost, I think one year I did abstain just because it is too much. And I'll speak for myself, this is way too much information for all of us to really know what we're voting on. And I admit that. What can I say? It doesn't happen very often, but this is one time every year that we're just throwing darts, and we hope that people are being treated fairly because we trust the professional people that we hire. What can I say?
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
I'd like to thank our staff. Catherine Hall does a great job getting us the information. The county clerk, Mr. Esch, every year seems to improve on the way that information is available and displayed. Thank you. The interactive nature of the postings that he puts up, even for a Luddite like me, are usable and informative. The maps, and I know that he cooperates with .com and our GIS folks to put those together. They just seem to get better every single year, and they're open and available to anybody, even with the limited skills that I possess, to go online and see. Ms. Badiato and her office do a super job, and I want to thank her and her staff, Mr. Goodwillie and the others who keep us informed and are always here, and a wealth of information that they possess in order to do this very, very difficult job. Kudos to you, elected officials, and to our Board of Equalization, Mr. Coder and other referees. You really do a great job. I mean, as Commissioner Boyle put it, it's a huge amount of information for anybody to get through, and it's impossible for us commissioners to do. Without your help, we would not be able to make any kind of an informed decision. And so the information that does come to us, although it's a lot of it, is accessible, and we do rely on your expertise and objectivity and honesty. And so thank you and your staff for the great job that you've done this year. This isn't the easiest thing in the world. I mean, taxing people is never popular or easy. And so, the way that we go about it, I think, is important in that it's pretty open. And as you just saw, you can come down here and make your case, even at this point. And if you don't reach the conclusion that you want in front of us as Board of Equalization, has been indicated here, you have appeal options open to you with the State Tax Equalization Commission, and so you can take our decision and go up. But I think the team effort by everybody here in Douglas County really needs to be commended. From our elected officials, Mr. Esch and Ms. Badiato, and our staff, Ms. Hall, Mr. Coder, and everybody else who has worked on this. Thank you. And it's not perfect, but it's a work in progress, and I think that every year we try to make it a little better. And I can see in the 5 years that I've been here, progress in the presentation of these and the consideration of these, and I just want to commend everybody for their effort on this very, very difficult and challenging task. Thank you.
Commissioner Dewitt.
Thank you. I would kind of reiterate that. I agree that we're overwhelmed with the volume of information. Fire hose into an open mouth, whatever. It is a huge amount of information, but by now we have had staff, I consider they're our employees, even though they're only temporary, but between Chris Mustow and Rick Coder, I don't feel like we're throwing a dart. I feel like we're backing the professionals that we have asked to review these. Every property absolutely has its own story, deserves its own scrutiny, and by the sheer volume of Douglas County, it does not work. I mean, we tried for years to do that, and we're finally just overwhelmed, and the system kind of broke down. I think for Douglas County, we've got a pretty good system now. We didn't used to stress the importance of the qualifications of the referees, and now we do. And I think we've got some very good people working on our behalf that do give every property as much scrutiny and individual attention as they can. So I don't think we're throwing darts. I think we're backing the people, the professionals that we hired to give us the recommendations. So I'm a little more comfortable moving forward with the system than perhaps a few others are. Thank you.
Commissioner Moore?
I want to stress that I have to trust the people who've worked on this, and I do. But what I'm saying is that it is impossible for any of us, and again, I said I speak for myself, it's impossible for me to go through this intelligently and actually know what I'm voting on. And that's what I'm admitting, that it's impossible for us to do that. And I, again, speak for myself, I don't have the familiarity with all 4,200 of these appeals to say that every one of them is correct. All I can do is trust the people who we hire, and I do trust them. But for me, it's throwing a dart. What I would like to do, and the reason I brought it up again, first of all, I feel that I asked the county attorney several years ago, who has a responsibility for valuing property in Douglas County? And the answer came back, the county assessor, register of deeds. And I think the proof is in the pudding, because if we approve all these, next year they can all be right back where they were. The Orpheum Tower can be back up where it is and all the rest of it, because that's the way that works. And so I really see that the Board of Equalization is smoke and mirrors and is not really a true representation to the taxpayers of what's taking place. And then, of course, we bump them on down to the people down in Lincoln, and sometimes it takes several years to get a response out of them. And so it's just not a good system. And if people go down there and are not represented by a lawyer, they're really, frankly, I think, and I'll express this opinion from what I've heard, they're treated very shabbily if they're not represented. And so it's just, this is a nightmare system that we need to work on it to make it better and really truly responsive to the taxpayers. And I don't think, from my perspective, again, in my view only, that we're not doing that. So what I would like to see is for us to figure out a way to get 2 more weeks after we get this information from the people who work so hard. I'd like a couple of weeks for us to really get into this and be able to talk constructively with taxpayers instead of with rushed emails and rushed action, trying to get this put together in the 72 hours or so that we have. I really would like us, that's my point, if my druthers is to abolish the Board of Equalization. And I've said that many times. I think it's a lot of money. I think it's approaching close to $600,000 or $700,000 now, and let the assessor do the job of assessing property as I think they're supposed to do. But I'd like a couple more weeks, so I'll just throw that out there. If we can't abolish it, let's get a couple more weeks to look at these things and figure that out. So Marcos, that's your job.
Commissioner Morgan?
I want to, again, Commissioner Boyd, just for the record, sometimes when a property sells and then you look in the future, the crossroads is at 72nd and Dodge, which is one of the good intersections. Kind of interesting, when it sold in 81, it sold for about $19.5 million. It sold in the last 3 years for about $9.5 million, which is about 50% less. And that occupancy and some of the other things can cause a little of it to be obsolete, and then you have to figure out how do you deal with that situation. But I do think, as I said earlier, Rick and his team and all of the referees in the assessor's office, they do the best they can do, and I respect what they're doing, and I think this is the opportunity coming here before the board to at least have us hear from the citizens, and that's what we're basically really here for. So I think they have a chance, and I think it all works pretty well.
All right, there's a motion, a second on the floor. You ready? Please vote.
I am abstaining, as I told you.
Okay.
For the reason.
Okay. Motion passes. Commissioners Boyle and Morgan abstain, and everyone else votes yes.
Is there a motion to adjourn the Board of Equalization? So moved. Motion by Commissioner Morgan, seconded by Commissioner Duda. Please vote.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, I have a question about item H.
Item H. It's approved already.
Oh, was it? Okay, I'm sorry, I thought that was in this
Okay.
batch.
No,
Never mind. Thank you.
please vote.
Mo- Okay. Motion passes. Commissioner Boyle abstains, other commissioners voting yes, and Mr. Chair, if I could have a point of personal privilege for a
Please.
second. Not to pile on to the love fest, but I always like to point out the Board of Equalization clerical staff. A lot of these folks have come back for, I don't think there's anyone here that hasn't been here at least 4 years, and kind of a comment that Mr. Coder said about dealing with people who aren't happy. I mean, they definitely talk to a lot of people who aren't happy, and they do a great job of keeping their cool and working with people and make sure they understand what they can do and do it in a calm way. I think that's one of the things I really appreciate about them is there's a lot of opportunities for stuff to get back to me about this person wasn't nice to me. People give them a lot of excuses not to be nice, and they're professional and they deal with it very well. So thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Commissioner Kraft.
Commissioner Esch, you're right. Should we ask them to stand so we could recognize them?
I think that'd be a great idea.
Please stand. Now you can put that on your resume.
All righty. With that, we will call to order the Douglas County Board of Commissioners meeting. Roll call.
Commissioner Borgeson is absent. Commissioner Boyle? Commissioner Kavanaugh? Commissioner Duda? Commissioner Kraft? Commissioner Morgan? Mr. Chair.
Here, item 1 is minutes and claims. Letter A is approval of the minutes of the Board of Commissioners meeting for Tuesday, July 30th, 2019. Item B is approval of claims submitted for payment and processed through Tuesday, August 13th, 2019. What's the will of the board? Moved by Commissioner Duda. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Morgan. Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Item 2 is the consent agenda. There are 8 items on the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda? So moved. First motion by Commissioner Kraft, second by Commissioner Boyle. Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Item 4 is citizens' comments. This is an opportunity for citizens to comment on Board of Commissioners-related items not listed on the agenda. Are there any citizens' comments? Again, are there any citizens' comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 5 and presentations. Letter A is the Opera Omaha's National Endowment of the Arts, Our Town Grant Proposal and Request for Partnership. Now, for the board, as they come forward, let's note, there'll be an action item in 2 weeks to approve a resolution for us to partner with them on this. I didn't want to put today on as an emergency, but basically the presentation to us is to inform us about it. And if the board agrees, we'll put that motion on next week. It's controversial, but non-controversial, but I want to give you the background on it. Basically, it's a grant that they have that we partnered on in the past with Blue Barn. Our research this year is that we have not committed to anyone. They've asked us for this, and so I'll let them go from there.
Good morning, I'm Shannon Walenta, Managing Director for Opera Omaha, 743 J.E. George Boulevard, 68132. I'm joined by my colleague Kurt Howard, our Producing Director, and we appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning. As referenced in the letter previously provided, Opera Omaha is submitting an application to the National Endowment for the Arts for an Our Town grant. This is in support of our Holland Community Opera Fellowship. The fellowship is a fairly new initiative that is grounded in civic practice, and it serves over 10,000 citizens in Douglas County and the greater Metro Omaha area every year. The Our Town grant requires a partnership between a nonprofit cultural institution and a local government entity. Opera Omaha requests today that the Douglas County Board of Commissioners serve as the government partner for the grant application, and we are happy to answer any questions you have about the request.
Commissioner Kraft and Boyle.
Yes. This comes under the Community Relations Committee, and if I got this letter, I don't think it was shared it. But how much are you asking for?
There is no financial commitment required. It's
okay.
simply an endorsement of the project and an agreement to serve as the consortium partner.
Yeah.
However, Opera Omaha has been very fortunate to receive visitor improvement funds annually, so we
I thought so.
appreciate that.
So this is so we can partner with you so you can apply for other grants that require a government partner?
This one grant.
It's just this one grant, the Our Town grant.
Okay. And why didn't you bring a repertoire with you and give us a presentation? I can't vote for it without a presentation.
Well, Kurt and I are not the singers in the company, but we could certainly provide some if you need them.
I'm kidding, of course. Thank you.
Commissioner Boyle.
Yes, I would like to ask legal counsel, is there any exposure, any legal liability we have with this agreement?
Well, it's not an agreement yet.
I'm just talking to,
okay.
asking legal counsel.
Sorry, apologize. Trustee York County Attorney's Office. Commissioner Boyle, could you please repeat your question? I apologize, I was multitasking.
Yes, I know my voice puts you to sleep. What I'm asking is this agreement that's the partnership that's being proposed, do we have any liability or possible liability if we sign this? I believe there'll be some kind of a written document, so I'm just curious whether we have any liability.
If I may, we'll be happy to take a look at that. This is not before the board today for action, it's just the presentation. It's my understanding that in 2 weeks, we'll have a written document to be before the board for its consideration, and we'd be happy to take a look at that and address any liability concerns in the document at that time.
That's fine, thank you very much.
Just for the record, Commissioner Boyle, it'll be the same reference that we did in the past. We did it 8 years ago with Blue Barn, so.
I was asked this because sometimes we get surprised, even though, because we may not have asked 8 years ago.
Good point. Commissioner Kraft, then Kavanaugh.
There's a line in here, I'm reading the letter as we speak here. No financial investment is required of the government partner, simply a letter of support. And I don't believe a letter of support would make us liable for any action. I could be wrong.
Appreciate your legal opinion.
It's well-founded.
Thank you for your legal opinion. Let's have the lawyer tell us.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
Thank you. Thanks for coming down today. You do great work. So the visitor improvement grant that you get, I think it's coming up later, it's about $111,000 this year, and that's for programming that you do in your regular season. Mm-hmm. What's your overall operating budget?
$5.2 million.
Okay. The grant that you're applying for, is that to do something programmatic or?
It would support the Holland Community Opera Fellowship, which basically has 4 artists in residence with us throughout the season, and they work with a wide variety of community partners in areas such as homelessness, disabilities, youth at risk. They co-create programming that serves the goals of the organization and the needs of their constituents.
That's great. And what's the funding source of that grant?
All of the programming is provided at no cost to the partners or participants, so it's entirely funded by foundation grants, private individuals, corporate support, and government grants.
So you would be applying to multiple entities to fund what you're talking about doing?
Yes, and the National Endowment for the Arts requires a 1-to-1 match, so whatever funding they provide, we have to match from additional sources. But we do have funding lined up for the current and the coming the season beyond.
That's great. And the commitment overall for this entire program that we're talking about is what?
It's about $350,000 a year to run it.
And have you done this before?
The fellowship?
Yeah.
We're entering the 3rd year.
3rd year.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this sounds super. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. With that, we'll put the resolution on 2 weeks, and looks like you got the blessing, so you're all good.
Thank you.
And we'll work on the letter.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr.
We'll go on to item 7 and committee discussion and action. Letter A is the Finance Committee. Item 1 is the budget report. Commissioners Morgan, Boyle.
I think as presented, and I think the meeting in September, Joe, if I'm correct, I know you and Diane, Teresa have all looked at this to be sure we're doing the hearings as necessary. My understanding is when we set the mill levy, and I believe that's September, that will suffice as far as meeting
Yeah, that'll be our
legislative
second public hearing,
requirements.
yes.
Am I, so I just wanted to clarify that part of it. Okay.
Commissioner Boyle.
Yes, what I'd like to do, I see that the city has selected a date where they're going to make their presentation under, I think it's LB, is it 103? And what I would suggest is that we do ours immediately following the city at the same place, and the same, you know, if they do theirs at 5 o'clock, we should do ours at, 6 o'clock or whatever. The taxpayers will all be present, and it'll be much more convenient for them, and it will be probably more meaningful for us. So I'd like us to do it right after the city does. I think it makes a great deal of sense. I don't know where they're doing it. Maybe they're doing it here. It'd be nicer if they did it in someplace out where there's some parking that's more accessible, UNO or someplace else further west.
Is that September 11th, Mike?
Whenever it is, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know when it is, I just
But
wondered.
I'd like to suggest that. I think it's practical and makes good sense.
Commissioner Kavanaugh.
I think that's a great idea, Mike. You know, when I brought this up last week, it was intentional because this is something new, just passed in the legislature. We've never done it before. So the more that we can get this out to the public, I think the better. And if the city's already doing a forum, I mean, going in with them makes all kinds of sense. So I'd second that.
Great. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay. With that, we'll go on item D, Community Services. Item 1, discussion action on the 2019-20 Visitor Improvement Fund allocations recommendations submitted by the Visitor Promotions Council. Commissioner Kraft.
Yes, I'm currently passing out a brief review of this year's county fair, which was pretty successful. And this is the second year under this operation. This is how the county fair's grant was used. Now, this was put on by the Friends of Extension. And if you didn't go to the county fair, it's the only fair that the national organization knows of that takes place in more than one arena. This is where urban and rural meet, excuse me. It's right on the front of our form. Where urban and rural meet. It takes place at Chance Ridge and Village Point, thank you. I'm not the best public speaker. But it was really very interesting this year. And it's going to be better last year because we had a critique of it this morning. I would like to present the Visitor Improvement Fund and recommend that we take it as presented by the committee. Motion to move.
That's a motion. Is there a second? A second by Commissioner Duda.
And quickly, Catherine, do you have anything you want to say? Catherine coordinated all this.
I don't have anything to add. The chair, Michael Leahy's here and could provide any additional comments, but I have none to add.
Michael, do you have anything to add?
Michael Leahy. Good morning, Commissioner Kraft, Commissioner Rogers. We have presented the commissioners this morning with detailed recommendations of the Visitor Promotion Council. We had a very good year. The fund was in very healthy shape, at least compared to last year. It was substantially higher, which is itself a reflection of the dynamism, I believe, of the hospitality community here in town. We had a large number of applications this year, and of those, we were able to recommend approximately $4.3 million to the commissioners for your consideration. I don't have a great deal to add other than what's set forth in our letter and in the handout that you each have received as well, but of course always welcome questions or comments from the board.
Okay, there's a motion and a second, right? Please vote.
Motion passes 6-0.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Item G is Human Resources. 1 is the weekly personnel report as submitted. 2 is legislative issues. There are none. We'll go on. Then we do have need for an executive session for labor negotiations, litigation, and personnel. With that, we reserve the right to enter into an executive session in order to protect the public interest with respect to discussion regarding labor negotiations, litigation, and personnel. Is there a motion from the board?
Chair Rogers,
Excuse me?
litigation as well, please.
Yes.
Did you?
Yep.
Okay, I apologize if I
No
misheard.
problem. Is there a motion by the board, from the board?
So moved.
Motion by Commissioner Duda, seconded by Commissioner Morgan. Please vote.
And this is for, I'm sorry.
Labor negotiations, litigation, and personnel.
And Mr. Chair,
Oh, jeez.
When will that youth,
motion passes 6-0.
Motion to reconvene and adjourn. Yes. See you later, Ellen.
Hey, see ya.
Take care of yourself, honey.
You bet, you too.
Say hi to Greg and your mom.
I will.
So I vote yes.
You vote yes as well. All righty. Motion passes. All commissioners present voting yes.
Thanks, Ellen.
Hey, you bet.